Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome everyone here in person and online, and those viewing us on YouTube to the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee meeting for October 17th, 2023. It is now 7 o'clock. I'd like to call the meeting to order. We have all trustees present, except for Trustee Luz Del Rosario, who will be here shortly. We would like to start with the opening prayer. If I can ask Trustee Herman Valoria to do the prayer, that'd be great. Thank you.
As we are in the month of October, dedicated to the Blessed Virgin Mary, we turn to her and ask for her intercession, seeking peace and pray. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to your protection, implored your help, or sought your intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, we fly unto you, O Virgin of Virgins, our Mother. To you we come, before you we stand. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not our petitions, but in your mercy hear and answer us. Mother Mary, may your intercession before God bring comfort to those who have been affected by the violent incidents and events that may peace prevail. Amen. Mary, Mother of Mercy, grant us peace. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Thank you very much. And I also I forgot to mention that Trustee Sean Xavier is not present. On to A3, the acknowledgements. I'd like to ask Trustee Anisha Thomas.
We would like to acknowledge that we are on sacred Indigenous territory and thank the Mississaugas of the Credit First Nation for being stewards of this land.
Thank you. On to A4, can I have an approval of the agenda, please? Trustee Herman Delora, you'd like to move that? Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Carried. Are there any declarations of interest? Seeing none. On to A6, approval of the Board and Bylaw Policy Review Committee minutes for May 16th, 2023. Can I have a mover, please? Trustee Herman Valoria, thank you very much. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. There are no awards and presentations, correct? Okay, no delegations. Go on to D1, regular reports. We'll Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association report. Mayor Vespucci.
Sorry about that, Mr. Chairman. Regarding Ontario School Trustees report, I'm reporting back as chair of the Large Urban Catholic Boards Advisory Council. This council was set up by the directors of the Ontario Catholic School Trustees Association. This council deals with things that are specific to larger schools and recognition that there's differences in terms of cost implications and what have you. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to mention that the meeting was on October 12th, 2023. And we met with boards. If I just 30 seconds, members of the boards were there. Toronto Catholic, I believe, Mr. Chair. The meeting. Alton, York, Ottawa, Dufferin Peel, and Toronto. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Pascucci, for the reports. We'll move on to D1B, good news items. Are there any good news items? Seeing none. Madam Director?
Through the chair, and good evening. We're on section F, which is updates and information reports from administration for receipt. F1 is a rescission of a GAP 6.01, reporting newsletters, complaints, volunteers, Roman Catholic school councils, and smoking. And that's going to be presented by Superintendent Max Vecchiarino. And I just want to note that gaps are implementation of policies. And normally, if we were bringing a gap forward for receipt, we'd be bringing the policy. But this particular gap, which is historical, does not seem to be attached to a policy at all. And you'll hear from Superintendent Vecchiarino why we feel it should be rescinded.
Good evening, everyone. Continuing through the chair and following Director Mazzarato's introduction, we are committed, and this board would have heard a number of times over the past couple of years, to streamlining our policy procedure and ensuring that it is tight, for lack of a better word, and that all items are reviewed on a cyclical basis. As part of our ongoing search to streamline, we have been working, we began a lot of this work on our policies over the past few years. We are now doing some extensive work on our related general administrative procedures, and we have found some that needed to be aligned to policies, and we're in the process of doing that. We have also found some that weren't aligned, and that we also no longer need as referenced. This particular gap that is being brought forward for rescission, which is on page 12 of your agenda package, is simply a listing of a number of items, from newsletters to complaints to smoking to volunteers, that is, I believe, although it is now 26 years old, it was an attempt to cross-reference items that weren't captured elsewhere. We have now ensured that all of those items are captured elsewhere, and some of the other material that's referenced in this gap is also no longer applicable and definitely no longer current. So we are simply recommending that we are bringing forward to you the recommendation that we rescind this gap, and this report is being provided to you for receipt this evening.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there any questions? Seeing none, we do have one recommendation.
Through the chair,
Sorry.
there's no action on this one because it is a gap.
Okay.
So
Oh,
it's just information in that.
Thank you. Actually, Trustee Daryl D'Souza has a question. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you. So we are ascending this gap. Is it possible for staff to tell me where the smoking policy has been covered, or the volunteering? Because I mean, you did mention that these specific items are covered in other general administrative procedures within the board. But would it be possible for staff to confirm as to which specific gaps do each of these items get covered in?
Sure, we can provide that if you'd like for it to be related to all of them. We can provide an item in issues and events. Specifically with regards to smoking, that policy was recently updated to include information on vaping as well, and I believe that was 2 or 3 years ago. 2 or 3 years ago, and it's policy number 26. But we can. We could very easily provide a brief item in issues and events, letting you know where the other matters are or where the updated policies exist. So for example, looking at this, our Catholic School Council policy has been updated. The number is still the same, although we will be renumbering our policies this year, as trustees will remember from last year. That is 4.01 subsection 5 on page 12. But if trustees would like, we will provide a very brief note on issues and event outlining where these are, or if they're still current, when they were last updated.
Yeah, in fact, it would be helpful because if we are ascending certain gaps, then it would be nice to know within this document that is being presented as to where the revision or the revised policies or general administrative procedures are currently lying.
Through the
So
chair,
if you could,
That's a fair observation. Trustee D'Souza, we likely should have articulated that in the report so that trustees had confidence that there is still a policy that speaks to smoking. There's still a policy that speaks to Catholic school councils and a policy that covers off any kind of communication.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, trustee D'Souza. Are there any other questions?
No, I'm good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And nobody else has any questions? Okay, thank you very much. Madam Director, G1?
Yes, through the chair, G1 is the annual policies for review and development for 23-24. Trustees will recall that at the first bylaw and policy meeting annually, we bring forward a suggested list of policies that would go through a review cycle. And it's also an opportunity for trustees to identify any policies that may not be on the list that you would like to have reviewed this year. So Superintendent Beccherino is going to provide more information in that regard.
Hello again, and continuing through the chair. As noted, we go through this process every year with you. We bring forward policies that we as staff have identified for review. Of course, trustees may always add to this list, not only in these meetings, but in other meetings as well, as you're well aware. We are now more, for a number of years, we were picking up on policies that had not been reviewed for a while. We are now much closer to being in the full swing of our regular review cycle. So the items that we are proposing to bring forward to you throughout the course of this year, one of which you've already heard about, are shown on page 13 and 14 of your agenda package. And as a reminder again, as I mentioned in my previous report, we will also this year be undertaking the fairly large task of renumbering and realigning all of our policies and general administrative procedures, as was mentioned to you last year. Following this evening, if the report is approved by the Board of Trustees, we will begin working, all of us, and some of these items, as mentioned, are actually coming forward this evening. We will continue to work on these items throughout the course of the year and add to them should there be direction from the ministry or through the will of trustees if additional items should be added. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much for the report. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one, just for clarification.
Okay, trustee Briacover, go ahead, please.
Thank you. And through you, page 14, so at the top, 6.69.1, harassment and discrimination. Was that not the policy around bullying, harassment and discrimination, or is this a separate policy?
And through the chair, we do have a bullying policy with regards to students. This policy 6.69.1 is related to harassment and discrimination in the workplace. So that is, for example, teacher to teacher, administrator to ERW, that sort of thing. It is a policy governed by our Human Resources Department with regards to staff harassment and discrimination.
Thank you very much for the clarification. I'm just wondering then perhaps if that title maybe should be harassment and discrimination in the workplace, maybe to distinguish it from the student bullying and harassment. I'm just worried there might be confusion with two titles that are very similar that might be very different policies. Is that feasible?
So through the chair, one of the aspects of the work that we consider when we do reviews is a complete, and this is one that hasn't been reviewed in some time, so a complete overhaul from title to appendices. So that will definitely be reviewed.
Oh, perfect. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, trustee Corbett. Are there any other questions? Nope. Okay. The recommendation that the report to the Board of Trustees policies for review and development 2023-2024 be approved.
I move. Thomas.
Trustee Thomas, thank you. Any, all in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried. G2.
Through the chair, G2 is the rescission of policy 1.04, implementation of policy and system direction as articulated in general administrative procedures, and this will be presented by Council Beck. It's found on page 16 of your e-agenda.
Good evening, and through the chair. Before you this evening, as the director mentioned, is the rescission of policy 1.04, implementation of policy and system direction as articulated in general administrative procedures. You'll see from the item which is in your agenda that it is just a statement that's hanging out there and doesn't add any value on its own. And general administrative procedures and the processes around them are more clearly and elaborately set out in other policies and gaps, and those are listed in the report in the agenda on page 16. So with this in mind, with the intent to clean up policies and gaps and any redundancies that appear, it is recommended that this policy be rescinded. Happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Great, Trustee. Any other questions? None? So there is a recommendation that the Board Bylaw and Policy Review Committee recommends to the Board of Trustees that policy 1.04, implementation of policy and system direction as articulated in general administrative procedures, GAP, be rescinded. Moved by Trustee Bruno Nika. Thank you. All in favor? Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
Through the chair, G3 is policy 4.20, fundraising and donations. Executive Superintendent Chirapaka will present. It's on page E19.
Good evening. Through the chair, this evening, policy 4.20 is being presented along with its associated general administrative procedure documents. Policy 4.20 was last presented in April of 2021. And at the time, the changes made were to ensure that the policy included information about donations, about tax receipts, and the use of the online financial system. Generally speaking, fundraising and donations have become synonymous with each other. Many fundraising initiatives at schools are actually donation campaigns, so they're very similar. It's presented this evening, policy 4.20, to address changes required in the associated gaps. There are 3 different gaps with this policy. Gap 538, named fundraising. Gap 704.04, titled donations. And Gap 704.05, titled charitable donations and/or contributions from the board. All of these gaps have been reviewed and the procedures have been consolidated into one gap, Gap 538. In addition to consolidating all the information from the 3 into the 1, we've also added that fundraising initiatives are included or have to be included in schools' plans for use of their school-generated funds. That's an annual requirement for schools to complete. Also, to ensure that there's a reference that all lotteries and raffles require a license. And to ensure that the gap clearly states the preference for use of online donation module, which will automatically generate a tax receipt for anyone making a donation, and or the ability to use the online school cash system. Another change in the document is to see that centrally issued tax receipts, which would not be the ones you receive from the donation module, would be eligible at a $50 donation rate. That's a change from the current level of $25. And the only difference is these are tax receipts generated centrally as a result of a cash or check donation. Schools have made tremendous strides in moving their fundraising and their donation collections to the donation module, as well as to the online payment system. There's only a few situations where they're still involving cash and check, but changing this is just one more indicator that would promote transitioning over to the module and the online system. And for the most part, the centrally generated tax receipts usually involve much larger donations of cash and checks anyway. If these changes are accepted, then the GAP 538 would be recommended to be renamed fundraising and donations rather than just fundraising, so that it would align with the title of the policy, which is also fundraising and donations. GAP 70404 and GAP 70405 would be recommended to be rescinded because all of that information has been consolidated into the GAP 538. The only changes made to policy 4.2 are just to update the reference to the gaps in the title section. Happy to take questions on those changes.
Thank you very much. I have trustee Mario Pascucci on the list. Are there anybody else? Trustee Bruno Inica? Anybody else? Trustee Bria Corbett? Anybody else? None. Trustee Mario Pascucci, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A couple of questions, if I may. The very first one would be asked very simply is this. From time to time, and today was one of the days I walked by a store, it says adopt a local school, and which is encouraging, of course, and it was a bookstore, which was nice as well. And I guess I didn't go inside, but I would think that people have an opportunity to purchase books and donate it to the school, which is quite admirable. And I've always been a fond lover of pages as opposed to just electronic format. But the question I ask of staff and Julie, I'd like to get something coming back to us once there's an opportunity to take a poll of this. In a few months, if it's fine. Do we have any tracking, or do we have an idea of how many donations are made to schools by the public, not by the public as private individuals, but by corporate? Because quite often I see corporate identities out there saying we support local schools and what have you. And the question is that, okay, fine, you do, but which school, how much do you contribute? So it's more like a feel good campaign, if you will. And I don't know if we're getting the benefits, if you wish. So, Mr. Chairman, if I may, to the Julie there, the superintendent, do you have any questions or comments on that, or does it make sense what I'm asking? And please elaborate a little bit.
Yeah. So through the chair, thanks, Trustee Pascucci. It's an interesting dynamic where a enterprise or a corporation may do a goodwill gesture of that type, involves their own contributions. If parents or community members want to purchase to be able to donate to a school. I'm not aware that that's happening, but I'm happy to take the time and poll some of the schools to see if there's any of those initiatives taking place. If schools do get involved with something, they would normally come to us, report back through at least supply chain, ask the questions, or come to our grants review committee. We have a committee that looks at any type of grants or event that a school might want to get involved with. Also, we have a process for fundraisers they get involved with, where they complete a form and send it in. So what we'll do is we'll look through some of that. I'll pull some of the schools for that type of initiative you just suggested to see if they are perhaps receiving goods that we're not aware of. But I can do that and come back with information.
Thank you very much for that. I wanted to make sure we work within the needs of the system. So this could be early part of next year. And I'm talking January, February, March, if you will. Because I'd like to get something comprehensive enough so we have an idea what's happening. But like I said, I encourage people and I thank corporations taking this on. But the fact of the matter is, I would also like to know, are we on the receiving end and to what amount? It'd be interesting to see. So down the road, if you could provide that, we appreciate it. Just working with the director, set up your timing and what have you. May, Mr. Chairman, on another point, and I believe we have concern, donations or payments for events and stuff of that nature at school level with a parent who may be using cash. as opposed to charges and or debits or whatever. What's the current system right now that's in place for that particular opportunity?
So through the chair, there's always a preference for using our online systems. No school should deny a cash payment, but the initial outreach is always a preference for using our online system.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I have trustee Bruno Nika.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Staff mentioned lotteries and raffles require a license. We know how much a license is for a lottery or a raffle.
So through the chair, I don't have the exact pricing structure for licenses, but what we were able to find out is it's a very in-depth process. And once all of the steps have been communicated to a school, they usually don't want to go through with it because there's quite a few administrative components to being able to get a license to do a lottery. And we've reached out to both City of Mississauga and Brampton to inquire. I know even legal counsel was involved at one point.
Is a license required?
Through the chair, yes. There no school, community organization is allowed to run a lottery or a raffle without a license or a game of chance, so to speak.
Like my colleagues, I've been to council meetings past 6, 7 weeks, whatever. Second week of September. The amount of work that goes into fundraising. And then it becomes, okay, this is what we have in the bank. Now, I was at a school, they had 14,000 and they put aside, 11,000, put aside 4,000 for year-end barbecue for the community. And then siphoned off $6,000 to go to kids, whatever the situation is, or whatever plans that the principal brought forward. It's getting harder and harder to raise funds to help the entire school, not just one grade. And I will say grade 8, they put $400 aside, grade 8 graduation, which was a medallion of some sort. It was something to commemorate the grade 8 graduation. But they also they were very cognizant to say, this is from 4 to 8, and we're doing this for JK 3. So it wasn't one-sided where all the money goes. But I can tell you the amount of money that is raised, and I know staff knows. I just find that parents can raise probably a lot more kids, not personally, kids, if we were to eliminate or find a way to eliminate the barriers that they have, because there was conversation about a lottery or raffle of some sort, not a lottery, but a raffle. And does staff have any indications of what what parents may or may not be able to do? I mean, this literally is hurting kids. As far as I'm concerned, this is literally it hurting parents to be able to move in that direction, but it's also hurting kids on experience because, Julie, you would know better than I that when was the last time that the school budget was increased from what they got? Because the only thing I ever remember was a 20% decrease, of which it may have, and I may be mistaken, been given back to the schools, but it was the same 20%. So if they had $100 that they were getting per child, it went to 80, then they went back to 8 to 100. That was 32 years ago. So the amount of money that the school gets hasn't really changed unless I'm mistaken. And if I am, please feel free to say you're mistaken. And I'd say, tell me how, so that I can explain it. We can explain it, parents. I find that this is handcuffing our parents' ability, and they want to do it. They want to have these scenarios to raise more money for the schools. Is there anything that can be done to, I won't use the word circumvent, but to assist parents in getting or being able to do this? Because I think that whoever's law this is or whoever's rule this is, they make it so damn difficult that parents don't want to do it. And I understand it. I get it. So it's a bit of a challenge. It's my first one, Mr. Chairman.
So thank you. Through the chair, I agree with trustee Ianika's comments. And yes, the school budgets have taken a reduction and then been given back to them over the years, but not necessarily increased from the original levels. The lottery and raffle issue is a tough one. And I know schools have reached out several times to see how to do it, what to do, how to get around it. Is there anything they can do differently? We do suggest the one way is a silent auction. They're allowed to do that. And the only thing I can suggest is we will try again. We can go back to the city of Mississauga and Brampton and have another conversation and go back to them to see if there is anything we can do to support the schools in that regard. Can't say that there will be anything, but we can take it back to them and have another conversation and see what we can find out.
Would it be meddling on trustees' part to solicit their counselor, say, look at, whether you're in Brampton, Caledon, Mississauga, we each represent a specific area, some of us too, to say, okay, this is not helping kids. This is actually hurting kids. Because as far as I'm concerned, this handcuffs parents on what they can do for a fundraiser. Some know they can do 3. They only do 1 because everything else is significant more work. I remember at the time, the drum line at one of the schools, I had a friend of mine donate Justin Bieber tickets and hockey tickets. They raised so much money for that fund that they had enough for the following year. They only did 1 thing. That was it. And so, I mean, if staff could do that, and I would, again, I would ask the question of staff. Do you see us speaking to our colleagues as a challenge?
So maybe the director would like to address that.
Maybe just give us an opportunity to go at it a different way. One of the things that I'm thinking about, because, you're hearing that, obviously you need a license, but it's a pretty involved process. Is it possible for Duff and Peel as an organization to do the 1 license, but then to identify that we might be holding 156 raffles under that 1 license, and then schools will, be associated with that 1 license? I don't know, but I'd like to explore that concept with them. Because if we're able to go that route, then it's, it's a Duff and Peel raffle in the name of St. Blankety Blank School, right? Rather than each individual school having to take it on. I'd like to explore that. And if we're successful in that regard, then that could possibly solve it. If not, then, we can talk about whether or not there needs to be a political conversation about it.
That would be most appreciated, Mr. Chairman. When we speak of donations, our schools donate a significant amount of money to various charities. And I read that in almost everything here. The one that comes to mind right off the bat, not only Terry Fox, but also Share Life. What happens to if St. Bruno donates or raises $5,000 for Share Life and gives it to Share Life? Do they get a receipt? And if so, what happens to that receipt? Who gets it and who gets to claim it on their taxes?
So through the chair, that's a good question. There's a process of events that take place. So when Dufferin Peel or a school fundraises on behalf of a third-party charity, we do not issue tax receipts for those purposes. Individuals can donate to the school. They're not going to get a tax receipt from Dufferin Peel. They donate direct to Terry Fox. And so some of the Terry Fox initiatives are set up where the payment goes straight to Terry Fox from the school. It doesn't come to the school first, it goes right to Terry Fox. In other ways, the families and students and parents are donating knowing they will not get a receipt from the board. We're not allowed to take those funds knowingly for a third-party charity and donate it. And if we do collect or a chair for fundraising, that's for a variety of purposes. One maybe being the third party, and it's donated from the school. School can do nothing with a tax receipt anyway, so.
Mr. Chairman, if I could continue on that line. I know you're correct. The school couldn't do anything with that donation, but a parent could. So if we were to put school of 300, everybody that donated, put everybody's name in that, and there was a donation of $5,000, below the name, and Julie Cheripaca's name comes out, that's who gets the donation writing for the $5,000.
No, through the chair, we can't do that.
Okay.
That's not, that would not be appropriate under CRA.
Okay. How can we, I mean, now we have to think outside the box, way outside the box, because first of all, we know that our hands are tied with what's going on. So I'll leave that at that. But I think and I'm not looking to give staff more work on top of the more work that they already have. But we need to figure out something, in my humble opinion, my colleagues may disagree, of being able to utilize whatever mode that we can to say, hey, Mrs. Cheripaca from Saint whatever won the $5,000 donation that the school made on her in her name, or whatever that way is. There's a way of doing that. I think you'd have 11 trustees that are all ears, not to mention each of the superintendents, which would relay it to the principals, which would relay it to council. Staff explore.
Absolutely, through the chair, I will explore that option to see if it can be done, or if and how, or any other options we may have.
Or what obstacles we would have to overcome to do that. Because I think that Dufferin Peel, as a community of 150 plus schools, donate. I mean, every school that I've been to, they talk about the amount of money that was donated to recently Terry Fox. I mean, one young man at one school, I'll say the name, St. Jerome, raised $2,400. It was more than 24, but just under 25, but over 24. Now, he didn't get any donation write-off, or he didn't get any of that, but the school donated in excess of $4,000. Now, $4,000 could go to one of those parents that actually donate, say, I'm trying to find a way to make it, beneficial, continue to donate for a good cause, but also reap some benefits to it. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, if I could, page 19 and Superintendent Chair Packer talked about it, about now the being a $50 tax receipt, maximum $50. Explain to me, how does tax receipt work? Like if I donate $50 to St. Catherine of Siena for the sake of an argument, and do they write the $25, the $50 receipt for me, or does it have to go to the board and then the board sends it to me? How does that work? Can you explain that? please?
Sure. Through the chair, there's a variety of processes that take place. One, if the donation campaign that a school may hold is done using the donation module, an individual receives a tax receipt right away. It's automatically generated through email and comes right to you, regardless of the amount you donate, from $1 to 50 to 100. Using the donation module gives you a tax receipt.
Oh, okay.
When the online payment system is used and/or collection of cash or checks, the school has to track all of the information. The system will track it if the online system is used. Otherwise, a manual tracking system is used for cash and check to track who's donating, what amount, how much by family, by student, gathering the totals. That comes central, and tax receipts are generated centrally one time a year in February, when tax receipts are normally given out to the public. So that's what happens in that regard. The other piece is we have to be careful what type of fundraising initiative took place. If an individual donates $50, but in turn receives a box of chocolates to then continue to sell, then there is no tax receipt, because you're getting something in return. If you get something in return, if you donate but get a hoodie or something, or if you donate and you get poinsettia, like whatever you get in return, you can't get a tax receipt if you're getting something or donating. So we just have to understand every type of event that takes place, work with the school administration to make sure they understand what they have to do and what has to come.
But just so I understand, if I donate $5 to a school for nothing, just donate $5 to a school, they will generate tax receipt for me.
Through the chair, if you use the donation module, it would be automatically generated and sent to you by email. You will get a tax receipt for your $5 donation. If you give the school $5 cash, you will not get a tax receipt, because the current limit is $25.
Okay, so do our administrators know that? And more importantly, do our parents know that?
So through the chair, when a fundraising event takes place, schools are to submit a request form, information form, as well as a copy of the letter they're sending out to their community. So we have a staff department that helps our school support teams, and they review those documents and make sure the required information is included so that our communities will know that information.
Thank you, trustee Bruno Nika. Trustee Bria Corbett, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thanks to my trustee colleague, Bruno Inika, because there's a lot of good questions there, and I hope I don't repeat any of them, but there is, I think, need for some clarification as well. For the $50 tax receipts that are generated centrally for donations, why did we change that threshold limit from 25 to 50?
So through the chair, it's a recommended change. There's been a lot, I think I mentioned, a lot of work and dedication to having the schools transition to using the donation module. A lot of that is the ease for parents and community members to make their donations and get tax receipts right away. So a lot of that has been encouraged, and there's been a lot of work there. The request or the recommendation to move to $50 for a central tax receipt is really just one more key facet in encouraging our schools to move towards using the donation module and sharing the benefits of it with their communities and their parents with regard to getting tax receipts for any amount of donation in that way. It is a recommendation. We've seen other school boards move to that limit in other corporations, but not everyone does. So that's the rationale behind that recommendation.
So thank you and through the chair, thank you for the clarification. To date, I don't believe I've seen any communication from any of the schools around using that. You're talking about the donation button through the main Dufferin Peel website. Is that correct?
Through the chair, yes, and it's also available through each school website, right through to the donation module through school cash. Yeah.
So through the chair, I've not seen any of my schools, it just Mississauga North, promote that, share that information. The fundraisers that the school has, there's usually communication about that. Terry Fox, poinsettias, dance-a-thons, all of that. I have not seen any communication from the schools that have indicated to go to the board website or the school website to donate through that portal. So, in fact, I don't even know if parents are even aware of that, or if it would even link up to the fundraiser that the school is doing, because generally they will go through school cash online. Even if it's a donation that they're requesting, let's say it's Toonie Tuesday, those donations are done through school cash online.
So through the chair, I'm happy to engage on a little bit more of a information blitz, marketing blitz with our schools. We can reach out to them, make sure everybody's well aware of these processes and how to encourage the use of them and how we can help them with any of their fundraising initiatives and how to go about doing them with the donation module or school cash online. We have a team that's seen quite a few unique ideas come forward and happy to share them across all schools. But we can definitely reach out and start sharing, making sure the information is shared with all the schools if they're not aware of it.
Thank you. And through the chair, so to clarify, so families won't get a tax receipt unless it's a donation of $50, or it can be accumulated throughout the year?
So through the chair, if the donation is made through the donations module, they will get a tax receipt regardless of amount, regardless of how many times they donate a year, they will get one every time.
Okay.
With regards to the centrally generated tax receipt, it's basically a manual process. It cannot be an accumulation of donations. That would be difficult to track. It's done based on the one-time events or fundraisers that take place at a school and information that's submitted. I would have to say it's not the more common method. And I know Trustee Bria Corbett has said that she's not seeing it at her schools, but the more common method has been to move to the donations module.
So thank you. And through the chair, I'm not sure schools know the benefit of why they would go through the donation module when everything has been funneled through, or mostly everything has been funneled through the school cash online. So I think there needs to be perhaps some clarification to the system around use of that and promotion of that. But I am concerned about this possible change from the $25 to the $50, because especially if it needs to be a one-time donation, because many families have experienced financial barriers, especially since the pandemic. That has not changed. If anything, the cost of living for families has increased, and no one gives a donation to a school or a fundraiser for the tax receipt, but I also don't want that change to negatively impact families and pressure them to give more than we've asked them to before, because essentially that's been doubled. So I would not be in favor of that change from the 25 to 50. But and just to maybe change gears a little bit, but I will mention it. I've noticed recently schools in their messaging around fundraisers indicate they have a fundraising goal, let's say $5,000, but there's only been a general mention of what those funds are going towards. So for example, one school said artists in the school, student activities, and initiatives. And I think where my concern is that, I think our schools should be expected to indicate all of the items that were identified by their Catholic School Council in terms of their fundraising for that year, instead of broadly student activities or broad generalized terms of initiatives. And I think they should also indicate what those expected monetary values or costs for them would be. So parents are asked for various school money for various activities throughout the year. And I think it's important that we have better transparency for the school communities in their communications. So specific goals, how they hope to achieve it, and what values are associated with each of those. Because I feel it's just too broad, and and parents don't know what that money is going towards.
So through the chair, thanks for bringing that up. There is a requirement in the GAP. I'm just looking for it for them to share what the funds being raised are to be used for. But definitely we can stress that that is part of the procedures that needs to be happening with more clarity and more detail.
Thank you. Through the chair, I believe it is happening. It's just here's our goal, 5,000, and we're going to put it towards artists in the schools, school initiatives, and activities. So maybe schools have, and again, no ill intent. They've included the hope, but there hasn't been enough detail or the associated costs. I think would be better just for transparency. And lastly, Mr. Chairman, I do have one more, if I may.
Actually, you can, but just I have Trustee Brunica to this point.
Oh, okay. I can
Thank you,
wait
Mr.
then.
Chairman, exactly to Trustee Corbett's point. The school that I was at last week, where they divvied up, where they had this much money, one of the questions I did ask is, are we, royal we, at the table that week at that school, are we advising parents that last year we accumulated $10,000? In this case, it was 10,000. It was 11. What that money is being, how that money is being spent? Because a lot of parents, they go, well, and this, the exact words I use were, great, another request, great, another request, great, another request. But if people know, and I said it that night, I said, if people know where the money that was saved or accumulated, where it's going, they get a better appreciation. $1,000 was used for a family in need, or a couple families in need to attend whatever. Trustee Corbett indicated artists in the school, 905 basketball, 905. Parents then go, it registers. Oh, great. Yeah, the money that I did. Oh, geez, my kid got way more than what I donated to the school or what I bought. It creates a different mindset for parents, a significant different mindset when it comes time to get that money that parents are trying to raise, that there are so many obstacles in the way. So, it's funny because I had this conversation last week, and now because of the policy that's before us, and Trustee Corbett's question, it's becoming a lot more evident. It's not just one school, it might be across the board where we don't, and Trustee Mario Pascucci always says, we never we never toot our own horns. At the school level, they don't toot their own horns. Maybe it's time that they start to say, you know, thank you for your donation last year. Last year we did this, and this year we're with the accumulation, we're doing this. And now parents' mindset becomes totally different.
Through the chair, thank you for that. As I'm thinking as you're talking, and your last comments are actually capturing what I was thinking, is perhaps providing the system with a template letter. You know, this year, dear parents, guardians, we are beginning this year's fundraising campaign. Last year, we raised this amount of money. It went towards this, and this. This year, we're hoping to raise money to go toward this, and this. So let us take that back and consider putting a template letter that can be used across the system that will hopefully bring some consistency, but also bring more detail and specificity to how fundraising money is being used.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, for you to staff and if Trustee Corbett is okay.
Sure, no problem.
If not, I can wait. I can't.
No, go ahead.
Just with regards to that, the school that had the 11,000, a lot of that wasn't created or wasn't accumulated this year. That was last year. So can staff put something in on even here's what was accumulated. This is where we're spending it. And these are the plans for next year. Because some of them in this particular school, they didn't want to commit too much to anything else because they only had one fundraiser that they were doing. Actually, it's going to happen in a couple of weeks. And so it had no idea, which goes back to my original question of the obstacle. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate staff's letter on or template on that.
Thank you, Trustee Corbett.
Corbett.
Your last
Thank
question
you.
or your next question?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Trustee Bruno Anika's point, I believe these discussions are happening in parent council, but unfortunately, I think that's where they're staying. And so I think the template letter would be great for the schools to communicate to the school community about those plans as well. I think it's really important. Mr. Chairman, my last question, just because we were discussing fundraising. So because it's new, at least new for some of my schools, some of our elementary schools have now made decisions to charge an annual elementary activity fee upfront. It's voluntary. And I mention this tonight because I believe it's being intended to be a one-time fee per student per year in elementary to avoid the multiple fundraisers that would happen. That way they know upfront at the beginning of the year how much money they have as opposed to throughout the year. And also some of these fundraisers rely on a lot of parent volunteers to support them, and just some schools don't have that. So not sure if we have planned for this. I know we've got discussions happening with the secondary student activity fees, but these elementary student activity fees are in lieu of the fundraisers that some of these schools are doing, and the amounts are varied. So I'm just going to throw that out there for your investigation and maybe some collaboration in terms of how we're going to go forward with that, if we're going to go forward with that, and how schools should do that.
Through the chair, I'm going to have the superintendent follow up with you offline to identify the schools that have gone down that path, so that we can clarify expectations around that.
Thank you, Madam Director. I would be pleased to do that. I raise it tonight because I don't believe it's unique to my family of schools.
Through the chair, okay, then we'll follow up with a message to the system.
Thank you. That's it, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Bria Corbett. Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to hand over the chair to Trustee Anisha Thomas. Questions myself. Thank you. If staff can go to page 27 of the agenda, please. Section, I just got to pull up myself now here. Section 11.6. The statement there, participation in funding activities shall be voluntary for staff and students. All students under the age of 18 shall participate in fundraising activities only with the consent of a parent or guardian. I have 2 kids under the age of 18. I've never signed a document saying that I give consent for my kids to take part in something. Is it informed consent? So if you sell chocolates as a school, you get a box of chocolates, that's consent?
Through the chair, it does require consent of the parents. So if schools are giving children boxes of chocolates to sell, and the expectation is children are going to go around the neighborhood and sell chocolates, that absolutely needs to be consent of the parents to do so.
Yeah, so what happens, what I've seen happen in other schools and my experiences is that letter will go out to parents saying, we're doing this fundraiser, chocolates, cookies, whatever it is. I don't remember seeing, and maybe I've missed it, maybe I've overlooked it, maybe if there's like a opt out, send it back if you don't want to have it, if you want to be part of it. I'm sure it's probably there, but I probably missed it because we've always helped with my kids.
Through the chair, let us follow up and make sure that there is clarity that parents should be signing off before they're sending any kind of fundraising item home. We'll
Thank you.
follow up.
Thank you very much.
Go ahead.
Madam Chair, if I could, just to trustee Stefano Pascucci. I recall parents, when they say we're going to sell chocolates, how many boxes would you like? I'm not sure if that's consent. I don't know if you experienced that. I recall something like that. I can't say definitively that that is exactly what happened. So if I say, yes, I want 2 boxes, is that consent? I'm not sure. Not sure. I guess that would be, if staff is going to investigate, then so be it. But I am not sure that that is a consent to participate.
I can comment, Madam Chair. Thank you. My experience and experience that I was at a Catholic school council meeting and they were selling chocolates and they had an almond chocolate option, but there was only an online purchase only, and it was shipped directly to your house because of nuts in our schools. I said right in the meeting, I'll buy a box, like a whole box, because my wife and I love them. So I actually got an email sent to me by the principal. Principal said, it's on order. You can order it. Here's the website, go through it and it'll be shipped to your house directly. I don't know how that worked on that one, but I know with my personal experience, a lot of it, if it's chocolates, it's no longer like you're getting a little box of chocolates to bring home to sell to your neighbors. It's go online and it will be delivered to your house directly. Or you pick up at the school. So like last Christmas, there was a fundraiser for chocolates. We put the orders in, our family put the order in under their names, but under their names so that they knew who it was for. Well, we knew who it was for, but then our kids' names were there so that when I went to go pick it up during their Christmas carousel, I forget what the event was, we picked up a whole box of it and we just brought it home and then we just distributed it to our members. So it wasn't so much of here's your box or how many boxes do you want? It was more like here's the fundraising opportunity. Let everybody know if they want to purchase, they want to purchase. So
To me, it's consent. Nobody's twisting your arm to order them.
that's-
Senior Pascucci.
but that's just one example. It could be an additional example at another school where it's different, where they are saying, here's your box. Go ahead.
Go ahead, trustee.
So through the chair, if it helps, what we normally see with that kind of fundraiser is a form that says we're going to engage in the chocolate fundraiser. Return this form if you do not want to participate, just sign it. And/or there's an option if you want to just provide a one-time donation, you can do that as well. That's what we are seeing go out to schools. Again, your experience might be different, and as our director said, we'll see what we can find out, but, and remind them that there has to be some type of consent, whether it's how many boxes do you want, or do you not want any?
Sorry, trustee Corbett, if I can, Madam Chair, can I just make a comment to that?
Go ahead.
Thank you. What we're noticing here that, and it's not like anybody's doing it incorrectly. It's just that there's so many different ways of doing it. You should have it streamlined. So hopefully, with that letter or, just going out to the system saying, it's not informed, you can't pressure anybody to take a box of chocolates home to sell the box of chocolates. Because let's face it, if my kids bring a box of chocolates home and I didn't ask for it, but I want them, I'm going to buy them. So sort of a forced consent on that part, even though I'll be enjoying them after.
Through the chair, but the intent of 11.6 on page 17 is to make it clear that no child should be bringing any item home for fundraising without the parents consenting to that. So if we need to clarify that across the system, we will.
Thank you.
Go ahead, trustee Corbett.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Chair. My experience was very similar to trustee Pascucci's, and parents were sent an email that says the annual chocolate fundraiser is happening. Your child will be sent home with chocolates on such and such a date. Please advise the school if you do not want to take any. And the challenge there is students are pressured to take it home, and no child wants to bring a full box back. So there are definitely some challenges associated with the communication piece for fundraisers and what that looks like. But yes, we had many a times if the parent didn't get back to the school in time, the box of chocolates showed up at home. So.
See Mario Pascucci to this point.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. I do not want to see this as a second form of taxation, if you will. And I know I'm really out there on that topic, but the fact of the matter is that I can't force anybody. There's a lot of people who cannot afford. I have a big problem with anybody. I don't even know what they cost per box. The fact of the matter is that it's a very expensive property. And are we supporting? Do we need to support the schools? Of course we do. How do we support them? The best we can. And I always want to make sure there's some balance to that. Work toward. Should I say, approach, trying to balance things out, but it doesn't balance. I do not want to be forced by. Madam Chair, if I'm Madam Chair to the director, something's going out to the system.
Through the chair, we will clarify with the system.
Have my next question, Madam Chair. Thank you. Page 38, section 2. The last statement there, the family of school superintendent shall be apprised of all fundraising activities on an annual basis. Am I looking at the wrong? Am I
Through
giving
the
the wrong
chair,
page?
can you clarify the page you're looking
Page
at?
38. Sorry, did I say?
38?
Thought I said that. Sorry, page 38. When our school superintendents provided that information, is it annually throughout the year, annually at the end of the year for next year, or is it annually at the beginning of the year for the current year?
So through the chair, we have this requirement that schools submit a plan for their use of their school generated funds. Within that plan should be highlighted the fundraising events they are going to do for the year. If after they've submitted that plan, which is actually due this month, October, every year, if after it, if they're considering something in addition, they would need to reach out to their family of school superintendent to engage in a conversation about that. We also have, we want to have the superintendent aware of the number of fundraisers, because that is always a concern specific to each school.
Thank you, Superintendent Sherifaka. Yes, and that actually brings me to my next question, page 42, section 11.1. I was asked a question, actually was asked a question a number of times last year, haven't been asked this time yet, this year yet, but I'm sure it's coming up. If information can go out to the system as to what is considered a major school-wide initiative. Because they were trying to do a really large, one day hot dogs, hamburgers, garage sales kind of thing, whatever it was. And they asked me, I said, well, I'll find out. And I found out, and I totally forgot the answer by now because I was back in May last year, or May last school year. What is a major school-wide initiative? I mentioned a major different appeal initiative would be like Share Life or Terry Fox or whatever it is. What is considered a school-wide initiative? Because it says up to 3 a year. So if we're doing Share Life, Terry Fox, and something else, that's 3 major ones already done. So the school won't be able to do anything on their own.
So through the chair, normally limited to 3. There are some of our schools that have the capacity to engage in more than 3, but that's where the conversation with the superintendent comes into play to make sure that having a 4th major fundraiser wouldn't be limiting to that school community. Or if there's another way to go about fundraising, and also to engage in the question, why another one? Like, why 4? So that's the whole reason for 11.1. It doesn't say you can't do more than 3. It's limited, but they can have a discussion to have more, but they shouldn't really need to engage in more than 3, especially in the environments we're in today.
No, and that's why if information can go out to the system as to what those would look like. 'Cause again, I was asked a couple of times last school year, and I got the answer, and I totally forgot what the answer was, even though I passed it on to the trustees. I'm sorry, to the principals. So yeah, if that can go out, that'd be great. Thank you.
Trustee Luz Del Rosario.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm just looking at the draft for the GAP 5538. And I just noticed that on number 3, red one, where it says it is important to note that legislation requires a 3-part license must be obtained in order for Catholic School Council to run raffle, lottery, bingo, or any such gaming event. I believe I asked this question about the bingo last year. And what we found out is the schools can apply for bingo. Don't need a license, they just need to be applied and be accepted to be part of bingo. And I believe we were accepted. Dufferin Peel was accepted, or was not accepted. They did not continue the application because they wanted to have a few schools with them. And schools I represent are actually thinking, combining their efforts and say, okay, we're going to apply, but it's going to be under Dufferin Peel. It's going to be under these 3 schools' name. So once they get accepted, that will be it for them. So they could be they could be like a charity sponsor in bingo. So what they do is they apply to the city, and then when they get approved, the bingo will provide them with the schedule. So these 3 schools right now, I believe, are talking and thinking if they could do it. Their biggest thing is you have to volunteer 2 hours for the session that they give you. But the return, let's say these 3 schools get 4 sessions in 1 month, they can get at least $5,000. They can divide amongst themselves. So I'm not sure bingo fall into this category because it's a different application.
So through the chair, and I understand the situation, we did look into that. That's where the school is pairing with a bingo hall that runs the bingo event. This is referencing a school running the bingo themselves out of their own school. But
So
So there's a little bit of a difference, and we do have the information about that type of scenario where they want to team up with the bingo hall, volunteer their services, and then get some part of those proceeds
Cool.
from their time when they're there. That is different though than this. This is the school running the bingo themselves.
So maybe we could, through the chair, maybe we could clarify that, because when you just say bingo, I know this is what my three schools are looking at right now. The one that's close by, close together, is looking at having a bingo for their fundraising.
Or through the chair, we can add language in this number 3 that specifies it's at the school
Yeah.
itself.
Bingo at the school. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Chair.
Trustee Bruno Nika.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just, this is the first I've heard of that scenario. Can staff put something in issues and events on what schools would need to do to be allowed, as Trustee Del Rosario indicated? Because I'll tell you, schools that I go to, a lot of the people there, they play bingo. And if they can, I mean, play bingo at Christmas, but it's only because my mother wanted to. But you know, it would be a night that parents could socialize. You know, whatever the makeup is that parents would do. I think it would be a lot easier to do it the way Trustee Del Rosario indicated, whether it's 1, 2, 3, or 4 schools, and whatever the requirements, the criteria are. Because some schools will say, well, I've got 20 people on council. I'll do an entire month and collect it all, right? And I don't have to do chocolates, and parents don't have to put out. I mean, there's a lot of benefits to this. I mean, a lot of benefits to this. So if staff could put something in issues and events on that, I think it would gain a lot of traction within our board and help in the accumulation of funds to help schools. It was the original.
Sure, through the chair, we'll put that information in issues and events.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff.
Trustee Luzario.
If I could add something to, because it's already been going, I know one of the schools will apply, will now prepare the application. So they're talking, these 3 schools were talking, and one of the council members said, like, if we get them committed, she's going to apply and it's going to be under the different field. She has the experience too in doing it, because she was doing it for baseball, the baseball. So once it gets, I'll follow it up as well, and I'll share next time where they're at. They're talking the flat, biting them. Once they agreed, we're going to. I'll share that. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any more questions? Seeing none. Following recommendation is provided for consideration. The Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 4.20, fundraising and donations, be approved and adopted as amended. Moved by Trustee Luz Del Rosario. All in favor? Anyone opposed?
I'm opposed because I don't agree with the change to the $50.
Carried. Passing the chair back to Trustee Stefano Pascucci.
Thank you. On to, sorry, just G4.
G4 is policy 7.15, trustee honorary and expenses. This is on page 49 of your agenda, and Executive Superintendent Chair Paca will present.
Thank you. And through the chair, Policy 7.15 was last presented in October of 2019, and it's being brought forward this evening to address meal limits. The current limits were established when the broader public sector expense directive was issued by the Ministry of Education. At that time, the limits that we established at Dufferin Peel, they exceeded the Ontario public sector limits, but were lower than the per diem process that had been in place at the time. It's been a number of years, and as we've seen over the last few years, inflation and other cost pressures have had a tremendous impact on the food service industry and other sectors, as I'm sure everyone has experienced. The proposed changes are necessary to address these cost increase pressures and place Dufferin Peel more in line with other school boards. There is a chart included on page 49 of the agenda that shows a comparison between the Ontario public sector, the Dufferin Peel Catholic District School Board current limits and proposed limits, and that of Peel District School Board. I will add, there is currently a survey being done across the province on meal limits. School boards have undertaken that through our COSBO organization to get a handle on what those limits are that are out there. We do not have the response yet or a copy of that survey, but from what I have seen come through in emails, the change being proposed would bring Dufferin Peel in line with boards that have already made changes to their meal limits. In addition, GAP 705, the travel, meal, hospitality, and other business expenses, is a gap that aligns with policy 7.15. It includes the procedures that staff follow for expense reimbursement. And it is included this evening as well to show the revised change in meal limits in the gap as well. Happy to take any questions on this recommendation.
Are there any questions? Trustee Brunanica, Darrell Souza, yes. Anybody else? Okay, Trustee Anika, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I often wondered how you could get breakfast for $12. Appreciate that I ever use it, but I appreciate in that. I do have a couple of questions just in general of what was read in the report, if that's okay. Specifically, gifts of appreciation maxed out at $30 including taxes.
Through the chair, the last time we brought this forward, there was a change that it would be $30 plus tax on top of the $30.
Somewhere I thought maybe I misread. It said including. Read excluding include. That means staff knows, I've said this before. I'm in a lucky situation where I have access to quite a lot of stuff, and which gets donated to the schools. When I go to the plant, I usually try to bring donuts. God forbid I buy coffee because then it's over. Currently in the plant, I have say about $10,000 just in some schools that are second. I'll do what I need to do and just do it myself. I'm not going to put in $30. But in some circumstances, like I have to tell you, $30 doesn't buy you much. And I get that it is what it is. I just find myself, I said this before, I don't care. I just buy whatever I need. I have to go to the Dolce Vita pastry shop on Cawthor Road from former students of Dufferin Peel, St. Paul, exactly. Just buy pastries and girls and boys, and they think it's the best thing since sliced bread. So our courier comes, they get action right away. That's just, my opinion on that. I asked this question before, and unless I missed it in issues and events, can trustees hire a speaker and pay for it out of their discretionary? Saw in the limit, it says staff indicated there's $7,800. My recollection hasn't changed since I started, but not that matters, but
Through the chair, they could, but you would also have to ensure that that speaker has been vetted through our speaker protocol.
okay. And the 11 point, I think it's an 11.3, it says 30 days after the end of the month that our expenses have to be submitted, which I get. It was on page 76, sorry. So does that mean that I can submit? I've already go into the actual process in a minute. If I could create a expense report for September, October, and submit it over 31st. It's 30 days after it was whatever, so it works for every 2 months. How long after we submit our expenses, should we hope to get repaid? Not that it's a lot of money and not that I need the money. It's just a question because my memory serves me correctly, and it's failed me quite a bit recently. I submitted something in early July and got it in September. Now, again, didn't need the money. I don't need the money per se, like need it to eat. I'm just wondering what that, how long that would be or should be. And again, I'm just going by what my memory when I submitted it, because I know I submitted it June 1 in July, and I believe that I got it September. Again, for me, it's not the end of the world. Fortunately, for some in our community, it is. But I'm just wondering how long after we submit should we expect?
Through the chair, that seems a bit long, but it also sounds like it might have been during holiday time. So we'll go back and review that to ensure that holidays don't interfere with reimbursement. But I think to help the process along as well is the encouragement would be for trustees to regularly submit, like to not hold on to receipts, for a couple of months, because there's a whole process of reviewing all of those receipts, the checks and balances that are in place. Then it has to go through finance to ensure compliance before it goes to the chair to get signed off. So there is a process, but it seems that that's an awful long time to wait for reimbursement. So we'll follow up on that.
And I could be wrong, and I will state that publicly. I could be wrong, but for some reason I don't believe that was the scenario. But again, could be wrong. Second question, if I could, Mr. Chairman. The software that we use for mileage, who developed it? Because I will say up front, it is the most unfriendly piece of software I have ever used. It on Sunday, it took me a couple of hours to do 3 entries for July, 2 entries in August, and then whatever September. But I had to redo a number of them because the date doesn't change. And there's a number of things that I had to redo. And I have to tell you, the reason I don't do it is because I don't like the frustration. I'll be quite honest with you. But it is, and it is the most unfriendly software I've ever. I use it for work because it's part of what I have to do, but I can't save it. And then, like, if I come to the board today, sake of an argument, I go home, I put it in, save it, Tomorrow I come back to the board, put it in, save it. Doesn't allow me to do that. Either do the entire month or you don't. And if you screw up a date and it's the 10th, and then it's the 10th and 12th, that's because you screwed it up on the 10th on the first time because you didn't put the 12th. And I got to tell you, I can understand why my colleague, I don't know, the staff use it?
No. But we will take it, no, staff do use it if they're claiming mileage. So let us take that back. I'm sorry that it's frustrating to work with. That would never be the intent. We'll take it back and see whether or not we can either fix that one or develop a more user-friendly one for you.
Something that I can go back to that entry, change the date and say, no, I went from Bruno, oh, that's the other thing, Bruno home to either board or custom. Okay, so I put custom. Okay, or the board, the custom, which is Bruno home. Now I have to retype everything. Name, my address, my city, my province, not my province, but the postal code. It's a pain in the rear end. It takes forever. And it costs me money to create that. So if staff could look at it, I would most graciously appreciate it.
We will.
And I hope I say this to all of my colleagues
No, I
because
think they're
we all
all-
do it.
I have trustee Luis Reserva to this point.
I was just going to say, I had the problem the last month because I didn't know where to find where I saved. But out of a click, I wanted to enter again. It came up. It said to me, you already have a form saved this month. You click the view and it comes up. So it was out. And I think if the trustees, my colleagues will remember, the last reminder I sent out, I asked if we would want to have a retraining. Because like there's some issues that probably we can be trained, follow. One area is that one because I couldn't find it before and I was panicking. I was talking to Michelle. I said, Michelle, I had half of my month entered in there already. I don't want to redo it. So I said, could you check with IT? But she said, okay, I'm going to check with IT. But I continued to going and I found out you could pull it up. As long as you saved it, you get one. By creating, you say the month. If you had the month already there, you already have a current month. Just click the. So things like that you find out in accident. In the meantime, you panic all over the place already by the time you do it. And maybe, and as Trustee Anika mentioned, that home doesn't, once you enter it, you say custom board and then return, automatically remember what like that maybe IT can improve. I know it's weird. But still, it's harder to, you're entering twice. I feel like I'm entering twice and I did mine today. Right, it's at least an hour or just. I like it, don't get me wrong. I like it because I don't have to do the Excel and go into my map class. When it's the problem is it's still so, and maybe once you guys sorted it out, we have it sorted out, we can do a retraining for everyone. So everyone can have the to do it. Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you. Anything else to this point? Anybody else have any complaints? None? Okay. Trustee Darrell D'Souza. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just looking at page 49, where the comparison between Ontario Public Sector, Peel District, and Dufferin Peel. And then there's a proposed revision of amounts. Any reason why we're not following what Peel District School Board currently has?
Through
Through you,
the
Mr. Chair?
yes, through the chair, the proposal is just slightly different from Peel. If there is a will amongst the trustees to want to follow exactly Peel, the total is the same. The proposal, the recommendation is as it is because the concerns raised, most concerns raised were around the dinner amount. So that's why a focus was placed on the amount of reimbursement for the dinner compared to breakfast and lunch. But this is a recommendation proposed only.
So the proposal came from trustees saying that dinner should be higher than what Peel District has? Is that what you're saying, Executive Superintendent?
So through the chair, I'm not sure I heard that clearly, but the recommendation is to align the grand total, a daily total, to the Peel District School Board, even though there's a slight difference between the lunch and dinner limits.
Yeah, because I would believe, I mean, if trustees go out for lunch, then it would make sense to have it in line with what Peel District has it. Because I'm not sure whether trustees actually go out for dinner. My recommendation would be, I think, to follow Peel District, because from what I heard you saying, Executive Superintendent, is that trustees suggested that the dinner allowance be a little higher.
To the chair, this is just in response to general comments, particularly when there's AGMs or conferences that are being held off-site. And there's limits in terms of where you can even go out to eat. And that the cost of dinner is more expensive. But if it's the will of trustees to align it for each meal with the Peel District School Board, staff would be prepared to take that.
That's just my recommendation, but I don't know what my colleagues feel about it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Trustee Brunica to this point? Or new question? You're
this
you're next on the
point.
list anyways, if you, either way.
No, on this point, I would prefer to leave it as is because dinner is usually more expensive. I'll be honest with you, with all respect to my colleagues that feel, I don't care. The other is, I don't know, I didn't read it in the report and I don't know if it is allowed, if the maximum allowed per day is $95 and we spend $10 on breakfast, $30 on lunch, and whatever balance is on dinner. I know it's broken down. I know previous job, they would give an allowance of, but that was it. That was what you would get. You know, if you didn't want to have breakfast, but you wanted to have a decent lunch and a decent dinner, then worked it out to be $100. So if it was 110, still got $100.
Through the chair, you're correct. If, for example, you're at an AGM or you're at a conference and you're there for the entire day where you qualify for all 3 meals, the amount is $95 for the day. And you can make decisions about where you want to spend that money on each of the meals. But the breakdown is if you're at an event where only lunch is what you qualify for, or only dinner is what you qualify for, that's when you would stay within that limit there.
Thank you, Trustee Nika. Any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to pass the chair over to Trustee Anisha Thomas. Thank you. Going back to the kilometers and the mileage program, just a couple of suggestions. when we fill out our information, we put in our specialized code per trustee that goes into our file and so on and so forth. Does the finance department, so Julie and her team, do you guys see the back end of that, or do you only see the printout that we signed that is signed by the chair and then sent over to you for
So through the chair, mileage forms are reviewed only by the chair and then sent directly to payroll department for processing. So the mileage forms do not come through my office.
Okay, so then not ours, but for staff's forms, do you see the back end of that, or do you only see? So like when I'm inputting this stuff into DP24, if you pull up my name, employee number, do you see what I put in there online, or do you only see the actual paperwork?
So through the chair, the only thing that is seen is the paperwork that goes through for processing. There's no connection right now between the system being used and being able to see that in a live online presence. That's probably one thing we should connect with ICT on as well. I mean, in the grand scheme of things, the best use of that mileage form would be to complete it online and have it sent digitally, electronically to the next individual, right? And that's a process we're working on a lot of our forms, to digitize them and do an electronic flow. It doesn't happen quickly, but it is happening. So that's something we are looking at. So in the case of the mileage form, the potential is that you complete it online. It's electronically sent to the chair who reviews it, and then it's electronically sent to payroll for processing. Finance wouldn't see the back end of that system at all.
Okay.
I believe it's more of an IT function right now.
And that's great, because typically now when I do that, I print it off, I sign it, I scan it, send it to Michelle. Michelle then sends it to Luz. Luz then signs it, and so forth. The reason why I'm asking that is I liked it when it was like the Excel format, which was really, really great, because I actually created my own. And it added everything up and everything else. It was all good. But since we are putting our unique code in there as an identifier, if there's any way that we can set that up that the system understands that if I put in my unique code at my home, automatically populates. So when it goes to, instead of custom, well, you always have to have a custom, because if you go to a church or a hall for a function, whatever it is. But if I go to board, even just rename it board properties or whatever it is, I go to home, it populates my stuff automatically. And that would be a less of a typing. So that's something that we can look at. Again, the ICT looking at that. Funny enough, I actually found, I'm probably one of the few that probably found the maximum number of lines that the program can use. Last graduation season, I ran out of room, and I said, okay, well, I'll just go back in and print out another one. Print it again. And I ended up messing everything up. So I just put it on an Excel spreadsheet, and I sent it to Michelle, said, I'm sorry, this is the way you're going to get it, because I can't figure out the program. So I actually found the amount of lines. I think it's like 50 or 25, whatever it is. Maybe get to up the amount of lines too. I don't know. But also last actually request actually from staff, and again, whenever you can. As with Trustee Anika mentioned about submitting something in July, getting paid in September, whatever it is, summertime, Christmas time, whatever it is, people on vacation, whatever happens, trustees get a spreadsheet of what has been submitted, what is being looked at, and what has been paid, so that we can have and it can be a running spreadsheet on Windows or whatever it is, or Outlook, so that we know that this has been submitted, received on this date, sent to once you okay it, sent to finance paid. Because if Trustee Anika's got a July to September timeline, I only can wonder what I have outstanding still. Again, it's not like I need the money, it's just that I like to know that it's being looked after.
Through the chair, we can take that back.
Thank you very much. I'm good, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Trustee Mario Priscucci.
Just in terms of a request. Lee, I'm going to ask the question here, are the terms and conditions and the amount of payment identical for everybody within the system, including trustees, SOs, et cetera? Does everybody fall under the same rules, regulations, time payment for periods, virtually identical?
Through the chair, yes. That's the alignment of policy 7.15 for trustees and GAP 705 for staff. They're all aligned for the processes and
Thank you.
Okay. Trustee Paula D'Amato Gimpanazzi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So my question would be, as trustees, we have to keep our devices powered up, our cell phones and our laptops. And I usually attend online anyways. My question would be that because we have to constantly keep our devices charged, it's a personal expense of ours at home. And I was wondering if the board would consider giving some sort of discretionary monies towards our own electricity bills at home to power up our device. I know even with my laptop, at home, my own laptop, if I close it down, it doesn't kill the battery or anything. But I noticed with this laptop, and maybe I have to change the settings, but when I close my laptop, it'll die if I don't properly keep it. Oh, I was just asking if there was any, because it's become a personal expense. So I was just wondering if there's any sort of attempts for reimbursement. Thank you.
through the chair, that's a very unique type of expense. It'd be very difficult to factor out what exactly the increase in your utility cost would be for that kind of use. What we could do is give some suggestions on when to shut down completely your device and leave it that way until you power back up again. That might be some helpful tips that we could share.
Thank you. And if there's any other boards that do offer some sort of reimbursement for that.
So through the chair, currently what we're aware of is a internet reimbursement claim for trustees. And at the end of the year, there's a T2200 form that you complete that would indicate what percentage of your home you are using for office space. Again, how you use that after it's issued is up to you, but we go through that process of issuing the T2200.
Thank you.
Trustee Luz Del Rosario.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just going to go back to the process, how we approve the claims and expenses. So for mileage, if you submitted it to Michelle, unless she has to work on it, sometimes I believe trustees would give their where they've been, and Michelle has to enter it, so it goes there. If you have completed the form and everything, she sends it to me right away. Only when she's on vacation, or there was a shutdown, I think, July, so something like that. But the process is as soon as she gets the mileage form, it's good. I signed right away, and then it goes to finance. Now we gotta keep in mind, you have to keep in mind that the timing in finance as well. I believe, and Julie, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe finance issues a check or run the check every 2 weeks.
So through the chair, the mileage claims are paid through payroll, which is issued every 2 weeks. But payments for reimbursement claims are paid weekly through the finance department.
You do pay the expense claims every week. It just depends on, so if I sign off on it on Tuesday and you're running the check on Thursday, that expense claim will be paid. And will it be added to our pay stub or issue a check?
So through the chair, the payments out of the finance part of the accounting system are issued EFT to your bank account, and you receive a notice of payment through email that you've been issued a payment. The mileage, you would not get that, but it would show up with your payroll in your bank account.
In the pay stub. So
Uh, Yes,
sorry.
I'm not sure if it's on the pay stub. I'd have to double check that. But you get it at the same time as your pay every 2 weeks.
Okay, so it will be kind of showing in the pay stub. I think it does show in the pay stub. So again, in the payment, depending when it turns around, the timing may delay that. So if our payroll is being run today, and your mileage hasn't been approved, then you've missed the payroll cutoff today. And it will go into the next payroll. So it will be around 3 weeks by the time you get. So I'm just doing the process. I know Michelle is very diligent as well in trying to do all of that mileage and expense claim, review the expense claims and all. So I know she's doing her part. Now, it was a little difficult this last few months because there were a lot of expense claims that were behind and it all arrived at the same time for her. So I do encourage you to use the mileage calculator when we already know it's good, because that will relieve her a little bit of that instead of giving her where you've been, then she has to go back and forth to you to find out, okay, so where were you, or correct that one. So I just want to give you the cycle of that mileage. And I did ask, like, when does it come back? And I do forget what I've submitted to. So that recommendation of a kind of a little bit more information, it's hard for us to go back and say, how much did I claim and from what month is it for? We would really appreciate it. Madam Chair.
Trustee Stefano Piscucci to this point.
Thank you for the explanation. Yeah, sort of, as mentioned before, if staff can look at providing an update as to what was submitted by month, and then what has been paid to date, be appreciated.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none. Following recommendation is provided for consideration that the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 7.15, trustee honoraria and expenses are approved and adopted as amended. Moved by Trustee Bruno Inika. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Passing the chair back to Trustee Stefano Piscucci.
Thank you, Madam Director. G5, revised policy 7.12.
Yes, this policy, which is entitled Access to DPCDSB Properties and rescinded policy 6.50, use of buildings, grounds, and facilities, will be presented by Superintendent Thomas. Starts on page 106.
Good evening, and through the chair, this evening, in response to a question from trustees earlier this year, I am presenting a report that includes a new general administrative procedure to provide general parameters to schools around the provision of designated reserved parking spaces on school premises across Dufferin Peel. Now, as has already been indicated by Superintendent Vecchiarino and Council Beck, staff have also taken the opportunity to review the appropriate policies to which the gap should be aligned within the scope of their current comprehensive review and streamlining of policies and associated numbering. As a result, staff are recommending that the proposed new gap, which I will speak to in just a moment, be aligned with existing policy 7.12, access to DPCDSB properties, and that existing policy 6.50, use of buildings, grounds, and facilities be rescinded as there is overlap in wording between these policies. As a byproduct, GAP 711, schools and other board facilities use of, has been renamed and realigned to the updated policy 7.12. So with that being said, the proposed gap on reserved parking spaces is what I was actually called to sort of speak to this evening. And it's in response to questions, as I noted earlier, from trustees earlier this year. The proposed new gap includes information to outline the assignment of reserved parking spaces at each DPCDSB facility while ensuring compliance with municipal requirements regarding numbers and locations of accessible parking spaces. Prior to developing this gap, information was gathered from across schools and through consultations with principal and vice principal associations to obtain feedback on how schools were actually reserving parking spaces for various users. Through this exercise, it was clear that schools were not necessarily being consistent in terms of how they set aside designated reserved parking spaces. In some instances, reserved spaces were being marked off for groups such as administrators, office staff, custodial staff, clergy, trustees, policy, and police, and visitors, and that was in no particular order. While in other instances, particularly in smaller school parking lots, reserved parking spaces were only being set aside for administrators. This new proposed gap attempts to provide some general guidelines for schools to follow in establishing a designated minimum number of reserved parking spaces for administration, staff, and visitors, while also recognizing that staffing levels may fluctuate over time as enrollment changes. Schools, however, would be able to designate additional reserved parking spaces as they believe are necessary whenever there may be such a change to enrollment or for other factors. However, the gap includes a requirement that if there are changes to be made at the request of administrators, that those changes be submitted to our facilities department to ensure that they are properly documented and that appropriate signage can be removed or installed as required. With that, I am happy to take any questions on this particular item.
Thank you very much for the report. Any questions? Trustee Loser Rosario.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for the report, Superintendent Thomas. I just have a question. Now, when we say they're going to have consistent parking spot, are you basing it on the size of the school, the size of the number of, or you just say one principal, 3 vice principals, 2 visitors? Is that what you're thinking?
So through the chair, thank you for the question. It's a bit of a combination. So depending on whether it's an elementary or a secondary school, as noted in the proposed gap wording, there would be a minimum number of parking spaces that would be designated as reserved. There's nothing to prevent a school from including additional reserved parking spaces, especially if they are a larger school that do have more staff who would be eligible or designated to have those parking spaces.
Thank you. So that will mean they could assess. So the minimum, you will provide the minimum number, then depending on the size of the school.
Through the chair,
Right,
that's
yeah.
correct.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent Thomas, Mr. Chair.
Are there any other questions? Seeing none, I'd like to pass the chair over to Trustee Anisha Thomas. Thank you. Thank you very much, Superintendent Thomas, for the report. But I'm afraid that this is not going to be followed whatsoever. You're requesting schools to send in paperwork to get it approved. We've known that, but we've seen presently that schools should have been sending in paperwork to get approved for signs and for everything else because they had to get signs printed. And they were just adding 21 parking spots. Now, where you have parking spots for staff, but not even for a priest at a school, that's a little sad. So is there any way that we can have this looked at again as and designate what is going to be required? So if if a high school has 3 VPs and a principal, it'll be a principal plus 3 VPs. The custodians, I believe, should have a parking spot, maybe not in the front because that's not where they park or where their office is, maybe by their office in the back there or closest to the closest door to where their custodial office is. Those individuals are there till late in the evening and it's not nice for them to walk around the building. But, you know, when you have a school that has a number of parking spots, but no parking spots for visitors, everybody else within the school gets the parking spot, including, you know, even, you know, the favorite teacher of the month, I think that's concerning. And to request or to expect administrators to send in paperwork and have it looked at and to adhere to this is one thing but my expectation is to make sure that it is being followed. So if a school and per their collective agreement, if you have one principal and one VP, like one of my schools, you know, Cabot, then you get one principal, one VP, and then they can apply for the rest. And it has to be observed because anybody can put a sign up.
So through the chair, if I'm understanding your comment and question, certainly as we're contemplating this proposed gap, what we're trying to do is basically outline that we would expect every school to have a certain minimum number of designated reserve spots. What we're trying not to do is be overly prescriptive in terms of how those spots are actually assigned. It may vary from school to school based on their particular needs around the use of those parking spaces by parents, by visitors, by trustees, by clergy, by staff. And every parking lot is somewhat unique. And that's what we found out through our information gathering from schools. So while we can absolutely modify the requirements, and to your point about custodians, the evening custodians, certainly that's something we can also consider. We're trying to also allow for flexibility from school to school.
I'm not going to name a school because this is a public session, but as per issues and events that we received a while back, when I asked for accounts for the number of schools, the number of parking spots per school and what they're for. When you have more parking spots for individuals that are actually in a certain area of a school, that are named for individuals who are in a school, that's very concerning, especially when there's not even one visitor parking spot. I understand every school is different. I understand facilities are different and so on and so forth. But again, if you're not trying to make it harder and make it more of a task on your side, I understand that. The issue is if you're going to be expecting somebody to do something, then it should be worded that way. You will, not you shall, you will do something. Because if it doesn't happen that way, that sign comes down and then it goes to visitor or to a public parking spot. Well, I have the school that my kids go to. The front parking is set for daycare. That's fine. I don't park in those spots because it's for daycare. That's fine. I only go daycare in Plasp in the morning. So I park there in the morning, drop my kids off, and then I go to work. But I don't expect all of a sudden for one of those signs to be changed to bus driver, for example, parks his bus or her bus at on school property, because it shouldn't be like that. I'm just worried that it's gonna be followed for the first year, 6 months, And after that, it's not going to be followed at all. And then we're right back to where we were before.
Associate Director?
Thank you. There we go. Thank you and good evening. Just to highlight what the intention is, and I agree that maybe the shall should be will, is there's two parts to this. There's reserved parking for, call it visitors, which is clearly identified that there'll be 2 per elementary school and 4 per secondary school. And those are just generic visitor parking spots. So what we were able to do, to Trustee Stefano Pascucci's point, is we did the survey. What we found out was a lot of what's at schools right now is legacy. It was done at a time when the schools themselves would just go out and pay a vendor to put in a sign, and that just doesn't happen anymore on the site. So if we break it up into its 2 components, think of it as visitor parking, 2 per elementary, 4 per secondary. That doesn't necessarily change. And then office administration staff. So what we did find out was, you know, the police department, the department head, everybody had something in some schools. And we're going to limit that now to principal, vice principal, or vice principals, depending on, and head secretary. And we heard that clearly from the administrators, that that's what the actual reserve for office staff should include. Principal, and that would change potentially, as Superintendent Thomas mentioned, if enrollment goes up and you go from not having a vice principal in elementary to having one, you put in the work order, we come out and put the exact same Dufferin Peel sign that says now another office staff. It's secondary, if you have 1 principal and 3 VPs, you have the 4 together plus 1 for the head secretary, which is 5, and no more than that. That's the intention. And if, as the SOs are out, family schools SOs are out visiting, or trustees are out visiting, or any staff members out there, and you notice that this is out of whack now, then somebody's not following the process, and somebody needs to be held accountable for not following that process. But what this does, and I believe it was Trustee D'Souza that made the suggestion to put it into GAP form, is to say these are the rules. These are the rules, and these are the rules we're going to follow, and here's the process by which you need to follow installing a new sign. And if you're not going to do that, then we're going to have an issue.
Thank you very much.
Trustee Bruno to this point?
No, I'll wait for Trustee Pascucci to be done. I'm okay, not at this point. It's on comment.
One, just actually a question. So I understand that legally you have to have a certain number of handicap spots or handicap spots per building, depending on, is it square foot or is it by occupancy?
The chair, I believe it's by occupancy.
So my question then is, we have a number of schools that share facilities with the city. Because we're a shared building, do we, like, are our numbers, and this is just clearly a question for my own interest here. Dufferin Peel School has 2, for example. Mississauga's facility has 2. Is that because there's 4 required total, or is it because it's 2 separate buildings, it's 2? 2 and 2.
So we're lucky in that sense, through the chair, that the city of Mississauga, the local municipality, is the one that approves the site plan and approves the total number of spots. I'm not positive whether, 3 would be us or 2 would be them, but we would have to submit, when we submit for a site plan approval, the total number of students and staff, and they would say, based on that and the total number of classrooms, you need 250 parking spots, of which you need 3 fully accessible parking spots. So I don't know what the breakup is between the 2, but it would have to be approved by the city of Mississauga and their site plan approval process before we would just put in site. They'd say exactly where they need to be and how many you need to have to service a building, a joint use building, or any type of building that we have.
And I appreciate that. Thank you very much for the clarification. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Trustee Mario Pascucci to this point?
A little uncomfortable with it, respectfully, Matthew. We just table this issue to the next time. I just want to get some discussion with my local community just to see what's happening, take a quick look. Recognizing now we have a framework to work with. I'd like to table this issue.
Through the chair, it wouldn't be tabling it because tabling means that you're going to pick it up at some point during this meeting, but if you'd like to defer it, and if you'd like for,
Well-
maybe you can give us some direction around deferring it, because I don't think the next bylaw and policy is till February. We
So
could
I'm
bring it
gonna
to
ask-
another committee meeting.
And me, Madam Chair, I'd like to ask that this be deferred until after the conversation with, well, the next meeting.
February
After this-
20th, through the chair.
Isla.
Through the chair, the next bylaw and policy committee meeting is February 20th. If trustees are comfortable deferring it until then staff are prepared to do that. But if you'd like to defer it for a month or so and bring it perhaps maybe to December. You have a December enough?
Through the chair, no, it would be FMP or a board meeting.
Through the chair, if trustees want this resolved before then it could be brought to board meeting. Once you've had an opportunity to discuss with your constituents
that's
and
fair.
then,
Madam Chair, Madam Director, the phraseology would be to defer this item till January's board meeting. Like, you live with that?
through the chair, that's fine.
December board.
Through the chair, that's fine. So we'll note that it's been deferred to the December board meeting. We'll bring it directly to the December board meeting based on input that trustees will provide to staff to make those adjustments before bringing it to the December board.
That's exactly what I was, thanks, Madam Director.
Trustee Bruno and Nika.
Madam Chair, for you to trustee Pascucci, who are you consulting with?
I'd just like to take a look at it again. He's speaking through me, through you, Madam Chair. I'm going to consult the community. I'm going to go look, basically, I want to go take a look at the store with myself. Come visit myself and a couple people. Just want to make sure, because this thing here is one of these things that do it now and won't be dealt with for the next 20. Like the community, go to the community itself, what's happening, really go to it.
I know what my community is saying. I don't care. I don't park here during the day.
But, yeah.
Hey, I'll be honest with you. I'm not going to my community and saying, what do you think about a parking spot for the principal, vice principal,
Okay.
head secretary?
Just leading you, Bruno. What I want to do is just go take a look myself, see what's happening, see if there's any issues here relative to the size of these spots. As down the road, Bill 98 is going to address the issues regarding and the street, correcting us in some cases where we want to keep enough flexibility there. Take a look and see what's happening. The idea that this will be something we're not going to move may not make sense to you.
Well, no, it doesn't make sense to me, to be quite honest with you. I'm, like I said, I'm not going to ask the principal, do you think you should get a spot? Principal's going to say, yeah. I mean, you know, I think that Trustee Stefano Pascucci, his rationale for the original request was there's a lot of inconsistencies. And I think that staff has said, hey, you're right, there are a lot of inconsistencies. Now we're going to make it consistent. And I get it that, you know, you're going to have one for the principal. I mean, I'll be very honest with you. One of the schools of this board that I share with somebody else asked me if I wanted a sign that said trustee pastor. And I went, no, so I'm not here during the day. You're wasting a space. And if the pastor's going, if father goes to say a mass, they put a pylon, or the principal moves her car or his car, puts a pylon and says, Father, I left a spot for you, and they have somebody waiting. So I'll be honest with you, I'm not in favor of deferring it, and you have the right to do so, Mario, and I get it. But I mean, you know, if I go to a school, I'm not going to ask the principal. So, I think the consistency part is what, and Trustee Stefano Pascucci can correct me, is what you had originally rationale for bringing it to the attention of trustees, and I've seen it too. Not, when once you raised it and I read the report, I did go to the schools when I go. I do see who's got a parking spot. In some cases, there's one for the custodian. I don't know how, I don't know when, I don't know why. Didn't matter to me because park wherever, walk over. But there has to be some consistency across the board, not as Associate Director Del Bianco said, this was the old days when the principal used to say, okay, you get one, you get one, you get one. And if I could, Madam Chair, just to the question that I did have originally, and Associate Director Del Bianco mentioned principal, vice principal, and head secretary. The school has 4 secretaries. Why the head secretary?
Through the chair, the feeling is, and again, this came through dialogue and conversations with the principal association. They're the ones that identified principal, vice principal, head secretary. It's because the secretaries either go in and out on cash runs, even though they're not as frequent as they used to be, but keeping them close and keeping them closer to the front of the school in the event that they're moving funds in and out of the building to go bank or from the bank. And to an earlier point, with regards to the custodian, we had conversations about that as well, but custodians enter the building through various points in the building. And with the common practice we found in speaking with the administrators is the nighttime custodial staff, which are the ones I think they typically arrive after 3 o'clock when the school is empty, and they are encouraged, should they like to park in some of the reserved spots at the front, going on that evening. So they serve a bit of a dual.
Trustee Luz Del Rosario to this point.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is actually touched by Trustee Ainica to Trustee Maria Pascucci. In deferring it, are you expecting all of us trustees to go to our school to be asking questions? So, because I don't think then we should defer it. I think as it was said, the consistency is there. Regarding the question about the schools that shares with the city, I have 2 of those. And I know in one of them, the parking lot for the library is in a different area. So they've already assigned when they built the school, it was already divided on which area the parking for the library and which areas for the school. And then the other one, I think it's all staff for that parking lot instead of the city staff. And that's where we're talking about consistency, because this school that we were referring to really have the front all for staff. And they just changed that when there's an event and add trustee's name on it, or the director or associate director who will be attending the event. So I think this is a good proposal for us to get started. So I don't know what I was supposed to do if I have to go for. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Director Mazzarato.
Through the chair, if I might offer, I think the commentary that we heard this evening is that there needs to be some stronger language to ensure that it is articulating the importance of consistency across the system and try and take away the local flexibility that might take us back into an inconsistent application of it. So we can take that back and reflect the concerns that have been represented here this evening around the concern. And then in regards to the signs, so to respond to Trustee Stefano Pascucci's concern that it's not going to be followed, they're just going to order signs. But once this gap is implemented and it's clear in terms of consistency, in order to get that sign, they have to go through facilities. And so facilities will know that if it's not following this gap, they would not be approving us or providing a sign. So if there's a desire especially on the part of trustee Mario Pascucci, that maybe it doesn't need to be deferred. Maybe we just need to work on it and bring it back for consideration. We could try that as well.
Trustee Mario Scucci.
Through the chair, we'll try and reflect the concerns that were brought here to amend it and bring it to the board meeting. So would not move to approve it this evening, but rather ensure that the minutes reflect that we're going to take it and make some adjustments and try and bring it to next week's board meeting.
Which recommendation are we approving today?
Through the chair, no recommendation to approve. You could do recommendation 1 where you're rescinding, but don't pick up recommendation 2.
Are there any questions? Any more questions? Seeing none, the following recommendation are provided for consideration. That the Board Bylaw Policies Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 6.50, use of buildings, grounds, and facilities be rescinded. Moved by trustee Mario Pascucci. All in favor? Anyone opposed? Carried. Passing the chair back to Stefano Pascucci.
Thank you. We're on to G6, revised policy 9.01, Catholic Code of Conduct.
And through the chair, this is going to be presented by Council Beck. It's on page 129.
Thank you. And through the chair, trustees requested that staff bring forward a policy to address inappropriate conduct by community members towards school staff. Staff are proposing a new gap to be associated with the Catholic Code of Conduct, policy 9.01. The gap is entitled Catholic Code of Conduct, Community Members. It is before you this evening. While the principal has powers under the Education Act and Trespass to Property Act to address these behaviors, it is our internal processes that needed amending to permit principals to act at certain levels without the approval of their superintendent. For example, currently, principals come to legal services through their superintendent when behavior has reached an intolerable level. Principals request a warning letter. The gap before you provides principals with a form of warning letter that they may provide to offenders of the Code of Conduct without going to their superintendent or legal. They will be empowered to use the letter before the behavior becomes intolerable. In our experience in legal services, principals will issue warning letters as a last resort. It is not something they want to do. In fact, quite the opposite. Communication plans, which are sometimes necessary, and trespass notices will still involve support from the superintendent and legal services as they need to be tailored to the circumstances. When issuing the form of warning letter through this gap, the principal will inform their superintendent, and the superintendent will inform the area trustee. They will also continue to inform area trustees of communication plans and trespass notices. And while this gap is regarding school staff, it can be used by general managers and senior management on the corporate side with necessary modifications. Happy to take any of your questions or comments.
So trustee Veronica, any other questions or comments? Okay, trustee Nika, go ahead. Oh, yeah, trustee Nika, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to staff. It's 9:25 right now. By the time this becomes public knowledge now, and for those in our staff that read the agenda or are online, I can hear them stand up and applaud and saying thank you. I can tell you a number of the principals that I have of this board the schools of this board that I represent are frustrated to death about the actions and the type of abuse, not only do they have to take, vice principal has to take, but also the administrative assistant, which is usually the first person that see, unfortunately. There are parents that are told to stay in the office while they go and do something that the parent has there to look for their child. And I can tell you, they are told to stay there while somebody goes in and investigates. And they're they're in the area that this person is going to before that person even gets there. And having this letter now gives them significant more authority. And I know in speaking to one of the principals of this board that I represent, of the school of this board I represent, they have had to issue 2 letters. I can tell you, attitudes have changed significantly. My concern is, as much as I applaud staff for doing this, because it's been, for me, it's been a long time coming. My worry is that some of the less experienced principals will now feel that they have to be confrontational parent. Principal that I spoke to has said quite contrary. What they do is they work with the parent and almost try to befriend them, but still living to the rules of this before it gets to don't bother coming on school property. Because some parents don't get it the first time. They have to get an actual letter from from Margaret. Okay. So that's too bad. And staff knows that I've requested a letter, one of the schools, actually, the same school. And the parent, their attitude was a total 360, like totally different. It's unfortunate it gets to that. I have schools of this board I represent where parents that kiss and ride telling the teacher where to go and what to do with herself. Running over a staff member's foot. Coming in the wrong way because they're in a hurry. And I have to tell you, I was told many times, go myself and to off numerous amount of times by a single parent, the grandfather actually, who got out of his car and was, and I said, what are you trying to do is ensure the safety of all these kids. Back in his car, made F off and drove to where this was parked. It's further down the road, not in people's driveways, which is you want to be a school of welcoming. Some parents make it so that, and I've said this before at the last meeting, people in this area have said to me, if I had known this was going to happen, I'd have never bought this house. That is sad to say. I think that again, a lot of the principals of this board that we all represent, they will be ecstatic with this additional letter that they can now give to people that think that they run the school board, they run the school, and they have open access to everything in the school. There's few and far between, but I will tell you, I've experienced quite a few myself. And, this will go a long way with the support, not that they didn't have it before, and I said this before, not that they didn't have it before, but now the support with this letter is undeniable. we truly support you. You can use this as you see fit, right? The challenge, Marianne, that I'm a little bit concerned with is maybe some may not use it. Not use it the way, not use it properly, but what happens after it. You know, I don't want principals to think, well, I'm gonna give you a letter that, that's what I don't want. If you're gonna issue a letter and then stand by it. Because the person did, want to fight another parent in the parking lot, things of that nature. The question that I have is I'm wondering on the bottom where it has principal, whoever the principal is, and underneath the school name, I'm wondering if our solicitor's name and title should be in the CC as well as the trustee.
Through the chair, we can make that modification.
I'm not afraid of what I want people to realize when they go down and they read everything and get to the bottom and they see the solicitor, Margaret, our solicitor, with her title and trustee, they now know that the trustee or trustees are aware that this letter's been issued. So if they call me, I'm going to say, oh, I know what you did. You think that that's acceptable. Depending on the response, it could be, okay, but realize this is a warning letter. Don't want to be, whatever the conversation takes wherever the discussion takes the conversation, so be it. But I don't know what my colleagues' feelings are. I would prefer to have Margaret's name on there with her title, trustee, just to give it. Trustee's name wouldn't give it it's the lawyer's name. Be quite honest with you. I'm just a thought. I'm not worried about a negative letter going to a constituent. I don't, if I'm worried about this person's vote, here for the wrong reason. So for me, I would rather the person know that I know. If it's somebody I know, they'll be extremely embarrassed, so they're not going to call. And in most schools, I know most of the people, not all of them, but I do know most of the people. Some of them honk at me in the morning, so. Yeah. So I'm just a suggestion. I don't know what my colleagues feel about it, but those are my points. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Trustee Nika. Before you go to Trustee Luz Rosero, is there anybody else has a question? Seeing none, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I did, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Bria. I see your name. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I do agree with this proposal, but I do have some concern. If I look at it as a principal, some of the examples of inappropriate conduct, some are very obvious, like threatening to do bodily harm is very obvious, right? But when you go down the list, I look at unreasonable demands upon school staff to respond to a parental query. Like, we get a lot of those. Like, how do they measure that? How does it become unbearable? And then you go down and making serial and unreasonable complaints. You get a lot of complaints. How would the principal measure that? Is what I'm trying to get at. It's true, we get a lot of complaints, but how does it become unreasonable? I'm just trying to kind of bring out, some are very obvious, that aggressive behavior, disciplining another child, very obvious. You could give a warning to that parent. But then when you go down to this making serial and unreasonable complaint, I find it, I'm a principal, I'd like to know how far. Same thing with the unreasonable demands upon staff to respond to a parental query. Like, we get quite a few of those, and I know the schools get quite a few. Then if you have an IEP, child with an, if we get quite a lot of, so I just need to get that clarified. And the other point is, how do we stop? We don't know being electronically recording meeting or telephone call. They won't come out until they need it as a proof. So how do we stop that? Like, how would principal know that? Things like that, that we need to also assist the principal and how they could really implement. It's good. All the excessive behavior, it's there, but there's other ones that we need to support them and clarify.
Through the chair, thank you for that. Because I think that I agree with you that it needs to be more clear as to what the behavior is, what the standards are, and what principals should be tolerating, what they shouldn't be tolerating. So I think we can take those two items out because, first of all, these are just examples of inappropriate conduct. So it's not an exhaustive list. And where a principal is unsure, they can always reach out to the superintendent, ask for clarity, but unreasonable demands, we need to define that a little better. When keep that in there. So I think we should take that out, and that could fall into another category. Probably something that's so outrageous. That's usually what happens. These are very extreme circumstances, and they are outrageous circumstances. So it's not just, this person's bothering me. It's harassment, affecting my well-being. That's where we're at when the principal comes to that. They don't take this lightly at all. So I think that the items that you pointed out can fall under the board defined areas, and what I can do is around.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Trustee Bria Corbett.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and through you. It's regrettable that this is even necessary, but I support our administrators, and they need to. It's one more tool for them to address negative behavior, and unfortunately, there is a lot of it. Parents, guardians, community members. Just wanted to get some additional information on the warning letter in terms of how exactly this would be submitted to the individual. So is this a paper copy handed to the individual in person? Is this going to be emailed to them? Is it paper and emailed to them so they can't say they didn't receive it? Is there a hard copy that is kept in the school office for a record? Is it sent home with the child? Hopefully not, but maybe we might need to specify some of the details around that. Is there, electronic documentation of this letter being given in some way in the school system? In principals documentation. And then I just think of times where we have principals that aren't in the school. If they're away, is this something the VP could provide in consultation with the principal? Then we have some schools that don't have VPs. We have teacher in charges. So just the logistics around it. I just wonder if perhaps there should be some consultation after tonight with the principals, vice principals around the wording of this letter, if they're comfortable with this, if it's a letter that they're going to be giving, and yes, I think it needs to be consistent from the board, obviously, but their input and their feedback would be important too. I agree with Trustee Ainika's comment about trustees should be included at the bottom. If anything, it just reminds the principal to let us know. So I always think that's a reminder on both ends, but I think it's really well done. But I do think there should be some feedback from the person that's going to be giving it, and maybe some more direction around the hows in terms of the method.
Through the chair, for clarity, we would not be going back. If this gets approved tonight as being recommended to go to the board, we would not be engaging principals consultation around the wording of the letter. We believe the wording of the letter that has been drawn up by general counsel reflects what it needs to say and also considers any kind of risk to the board. So I'm not so sure. I just want to make that clear. If this gets approved as a recommendation to the board, we wouldn't be consulting with principals on about the wording. We've heard some suggestions from trustees about some of the wording that needs to be removed, and we would agree in that regard. I think what you're getting at is what kind of in-servicing are we going to do with our principals? And it would also respond to trustee Ainika's concern about perhaps even inexperienced principals that might have some hesitancy around how to use it. And so clearly we will do in-servicing through the family of schools SOs to ensure there's consistent message and an understanding around how the letter gets used in general. This would be no different than the kind of progressive approaches that our principals use with our students in their schools. You know, we always want to ensure that where possible, that if there's behavior that's unacceptable, you do that in the context of trying to maintain a positive relationship with our families and, you know, just having a conversation with them to bring to their attention that the behavior they're engaging in is offensive and harmful. Oftentimes that's all that needs to happen. Doesn't need to have any kind of formal record. But from time to time, we do experience situations where it is time to put our concerns in writing. And in terms of the delivery, we would expect that the principals would use the same sort of delivery methods that they do to communicate with parents directly. If parents have email addresses, we would do it that way. If parents need, you know, a letter that's sealed, that we would do it that way as well. So we'll work with the principals in that regard on that.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Are there any more questions? Seeing none. All right, got the motion here. So that the Board Bylaw Policy Review Committee recommend to the Board of Trustees that policy 9.01 Catholic Code of Conduct be approved and enacted as amended. I have a mover, please. Trustee Bruno Nika. Aye. All in favor? Any opposed? Sorry, Trustee Thomas, is that in favor or opposed? Sorry.
I'm in favor.
In favor, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none, carried.
They asked that shown as
Unanimous as in who's in attendance, yes. Thank you. Yes. All right, on to section H. There are no notices of motion. Any questions asked of by trustees? Section I. Trustee Mario Pascucci, are there anybody else? Go ahead, please.
Discussion with a community representative, discussion with a parent from a particular school, keep nameless at this point. Question regarding the idea of air quality became an issue in terms of a concern that this parent has. Some of the question is, how is Dufferin Peel monitoring air quality on a daily basis? This is also relative to C2 levels within each school. So, Mr. Chairman, I mentioned it to the superintendent before. Discuss this later on. Send it to
Through the chair, that's fine.
Second point, Mr. Chairman, is the idea of large urban Catholic Board Advisory Council. Now, recognize this is an A and F. Items, we have a committee that requires this information to be worked on as quickly as possible. And there's a couple of things that the large urban Catholic Boards Advisory Council asked. This council here's recommendations are forwarded to the directors, talks to the directors, and the concerns that they are relative to school boards that are very, very large within the province of Ontario. And essentially was in terms of looking at the costing of some of the elements that we have to run the board, such as the cost of ESL. What I'm going to do, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to forward this. I'm going to give a hard copy to the superintendent or to the director, and then I'll talk to the director and work it out. Answers there are. On the road where I see this going is that information will be forwarded to the association, so they could take a look at all the large urban boards, in this case, Toronto, Dufferin Peel, Ottawa, et cetera. Alton, example. Mr. Chairman, thank you for your indulgence, and I'll give this information.
Thank you. Any other questions? Trustee Luzer Reserve, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's not really a question. It is an invitation that we received. I know some of the trustees received an invitation from Safe City, Mississauga, where they're hosting the 2023 Crime Prevention Conference. And this time they're focusing on online harms, bullying to hate. So it's something that I think the staff may want to know, and I don't know if you have that information, but I'll forward it to you. So just to let you know, they're giving us complimentary tickets. I don't know if they're gonna give complimentary to the staff, but the trustees were being offered complimentary tickets. So I encourage anyone who is interested in attending, and they do have great speakers, especially for the online bullying, that their online harms. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any more questions? Seeing none, there are no declared interest items. This evening, there are no in-cameras, there is no in-camera session. So I would like to, well, before I do that, future meetings will be on February 20th, 2024 is our next bylaw meeting. I'd like to move adjournment. We move adjournment. Let's go from online. Trustee Darrell D'Souza, thank you. Any opposed? Seeing none. Sorry, all in favor? Sorry, I have to do that too. Good evening, everybody. Thank you very much, for everybody who's viewed us online.